would like to think I'm an emotionally aware person. Like, that's their problem. Sometimes the truth hurts, okay? Hey dancers, it's Kirsten. Welcome back to Twin Talks Ballet. You know that normally I'm here giving you guys thoughtful advice on how to flourish as a dancer. Usually I'm discussing this by addressing topics on like how to increase your confidence or how to stand out in auditions. You know, various tactics and strategies and advice, insights I'm giving you guys to actually enhance your ability to perform at a top level as a dancer, which generally makes dancers happier, you know? Or I'm also talking about mental well-being, mindset tips, and things like that. I would definitely be remiss and also ignoring my personal values for honesty and integrity if I didn't sometimes cover topics that really shine a light on the dark sides of dance. That's something I find to be very, very, very important. And just as much as I want to equip dancers for success by talking about nice, positive things, I also want to equip dancers to face the industry as it currently is without trying to cover it up. And I think we all know that there are teachers out there that are allowed to exhibit toxic behaviors in the name of, well, that's just ballet. It's just tough. I really want to speak on signs. I want to give you awareness of signs that your teacher is exhibiting toxic behaviors. I will also be giving you tips on how to handle this if you do see that your teacher is exhibiting some of the behaviors I'll be talking about, so that you can ultimately protect yourself. Not just physically, not just by telling someone, but I also really want to make this video to protect you mentally and emotionally from internalizing the damaging messages that your teachers who are sharing them with you probably got from their teachers. I want to stop the cycle. I know that's lofty, but maybe I could do it one video at a time with you. I want to do what I can because I know what it's like to have extremely toxic ballet teachers, but to, at that time in my life, have so little awareness of what I should and should not put up with. What is ballet and what is abuse? I had no idea of that line. So what did I do? I made excuses for that teacher. I just thought I need to be strong enough to deal with it. Maybe I'm not strong enough. Maybe I'm not smart enough. And eventually what started to happen is I started to point the fingers back at myself, which I know a lot of dancers do. I've coached a lot of dancers who have those internalized messages going on that were really from ballet teachers. They're not actually incapable. They're not actually stupid. When we allow teachers to just act the way they're going to act without any sort of mental barrier of, okay, that was wrong. I'm actually not going to accept that, even if it's just on the inside. That is one big step towards protecting yourself from labeling you and you alone as the problem, as if something is really wrong with you. You know, we all have things to work on, for sure. Sometimes we just get feedback that's so true. Sometimes the truth hurts, okay? I get that. I've gotten corrections that were actually good that I totally cried about later. Totally. And then later, and this is on me, I would draw my own conclusions after that about like, well, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. That's a limiting belief. And it didn't have anything to do with really what my teacher was telling me. They weren't telling me I wasn't cut out for it. They were actually pushing me, and they really did believe in me, and they were awesome teachers. But that's very different than the kind of teacher who will exhibit some of the behaviors I'll talk about in a moment, take no personal responsibility at all for how that affects you, and then blame you when you're not coping well with it. That's very different. So I hope this video is helpful. I know that it will not be totally comprehensive. I know it won't be perfect. So I would love for you guys to share in the comments about your experience, maybe your thoughts on this matter, so that we can all start to determine and sort through the gray area that this can be. Let's get into it. So the first sign, in my opinion, and this isn't in a particular order, if your teacher consistently exhibits erratic emotional outbursts or extreme inconsistency in their mood, paired with a clear lack of awareness of what's going on, they allow those emotions to impact how they speak to students, to even motivate things like making a ballet class disproportionately difficult compared to their normal classes, almost to like inflict pain and suffering on the students. If your teacher is showing this behavior and also demonstrating that they have no awareness that they're doing it, or maybe they're aware, but they're not so aware of maybe that it started with them maybe having a bad morning, something went on, I don't know, maybe their kid colored the walls or something. And instead of dealing with that, they brought whatever's going on with them into the studio and then didn't show an awareness of, oh, this is what's going on with me. How can I still do my job as I normally would with these dancers? If they don't show that, that's really a problem. The next layer to this is also if they show no willingness to take personal responsibility for their actions. For instance, if you can tell as a teacher, I'm a teacher myself, so I know how it is. I get it. It's in some ways caused me, like, awareness of these tendencies has humbled me, because I know personally, if I wasn't watching myself, I could fall into these behaviors. It's scary how easy it is to, as a teacher, like really feel like you have the best intentions, you want the best for your students, but then like yell at some little 12-year-old girl because you're telling her for the 5th time that she's not in line. It is so easy in those moments to let the frustration overwhelm you, even if you are, hopefully, like I would like to think I'm an emotionally aware person. It is so easy to let that programming come up of, well, she just has to fix it, and forget that that little person is a person, you know? And at a certain level, the tears that you might cause them are not worth a crossed tendu. It's just not. To sum that up, if your teacher shows no awareness of what's impacting them emotionally and mentally, and they also show, secondly, no ability to regulate that in order to act consistently rather than being reactive from their emotions. Third, if they show absolutely no remorse or willingness to take responsibility when they do act out of line, like they should be able to apologize if they say something that's harsh. I know I've done this many times as a teacher. It's possible, okay? I have said things to students before that honestly I know for maybe a pre-professional student who's 17 years old, they are used to just like straight to the point kind of corrections, like no fluff. That's totally acceptable in some situations. And there have been times where I'm just not thinking and I say something to a 12-year-old that maybe is more appropriate for a 17-year-old, and I pause and I say, I'm sorry, that was a little bit harsh. Let me rephrase that. It's stupid easy to do, honestly. So if your teacher shows no remorse, no willingness to take responsibility, no awareness of where their emotions are coming from, or ability to regulate that, that is a problem. The second sign that you should really be aware of is if your teacher is consistently changing their standards and expectations around to where they are not keeping the standards and expectations consistent, and also they are holding you to standards that they did not articulate and then getting upset with you if you don't live up to the standard that they did not articulate well, like that's their problem. Basically, teachers should be able to take responsibility for their own shortcomings. Like that's a general thing. Like I think everyone should know that. As a person, you should be able to do that. And there are many times when teachers should know themselves well enough to know that they consistently do not articulate what they want clearly. But if they do not articulate what they want clearly, and then they hold you to a standard as if you should have known, that's really ridiculous. For example, I was working with a client this week. She started rehearsing with this new company for a production. The director said, I need you guys to buy some fans as props and have them by tomorrow. They come back for rehearsal later that afternoon and get chewed out for not having the fans, even though he said tomorrow. He showed no remorse for that, no acknowledgement of what he previously said, and just didn't have a problem chewing them out over it. That is toxic behavior. And it's this sort of switching of standards and expectations, or holding dancers to an expectation that was unspoken or articulated very poorly, that is unacceptable. Also, I'll add this on, if they can't handle you asking a question to clarify, or they also cannot handle giving feedback, like, excuse me, you had said earlier that you wanted the fans by tomorrow. So I was expecting to get a fan after rehearsal today. If you make a teacher aware of that, and they totally flip out on you, that shows extreme immaturity that you should not have to put up with. Next, if your teacher is demonstrating or using negatively the pygmalion effect, meaning that they expect the worst of you before you even try. They will expect that you will make mistakes. They will say, this run will probably be trash anyway. And then they have you run it. What does that do? It projects onto you that they don't believe in you, that they already aren't feeling great about it. Understandably, unless you really put a mental wall up and you're like, screw that. I'm going to do great, Sometimes it gets to you anyway. So what often happens is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They say something like, of course you're going to make a mistake, whatever. This probably won't be good. And then from there, that affects you. And when it affects you, they're like, see, I knew it. Solidifying that you should feel really badly about yourself for something that they suggested to you that actually probably impacted your performance. That is definitely toxic behavior, unacceptable for sure. I had this happen to me in a very specific instance. It was so obvious. This teacher had got onto me the week before, or a couple days before, about not knowing a combination. And so what she did is, in front of a bunch of people, all of a sudden she shows this combination really quickly. It was kind of confusing. And then she just goes, Kemp, show it. Then she said, do you know it? And I was like, yes, I think so, yes. And she goes, I bet you don't. Do it. And so then I was just like, okay. And so I did it. I think I did it well enough. It sounded like I did it better than she expected. And from there, she gave no apology, no acknowledgement that I did it well enough, that I did in fact know it. That was unacceptable. That could have really impacted me. It certainly made me more nervous. But I think out of that terror, I was like, well, I better flip and do it, Using fear and shame and humiliation to motivate students towards results. Take what I'm about to say very, very seriously. Take it to heart. That mode of motivating dancers, or that way of doing it, is so normal in our culture. But let me tell you, that is not something that we just need to accept, like, oh, that's just how ballet is. No, they're scaring you into doing well. And that actually doesn't work. It actually doesn't produce great results. I don't think these teachers even know how much better their students could be dancing. If you expressed belief in them, maybe they would actually do well. While you still equip them with standards, promote discipline, there's a difference, okay? Discipline is important, but shaming and humiliating is not necessary to keep people scared enough and feeling horrible enough to comply with the group or to comply with what the teacher says. That is just unacceptable. And it needs to not be normal anymore. This point actually goes into my next point. Teachers should be very careful with physical touch. Particularly what I mean is when they touch you in order to help you assimilate a correction, to figure it out in your own body. This can be very helpful, especially for students that are kinesthetic learners. However, thank goodness it seems to be normalized a little bit more in ballet culture now to ask permission to touch, especially if you're touching like a more sensitive area, maybe your inner thigh, your lower back. It should be normalized. I know it's not yet totally, but it should be normalized to say, is it okay if I help you and touch you here? Is that okay? Before you do, as a teacher. Now, that would be in an ideal world, but I'll say what is clearly toxic behavior is if a teacher hits, scratches, slaps in a way that actually leaves a mark on your body, causes you pain, causes you to be fearful. Maybe they're behind you, you don't know they're coming up right behind you, and they like pull on your leg to get it straight and knock you off. First, that is totally a fear tactic. Like, who isn't freaked out by someone like coming up behind them and doing something like that? That's human nature to be freaked out by that. That's just not okay. The other thing is, if the teacher is manipulating you in such a rough way that it actually causes maybe potential for injury, that's definitely not okay. They really don't need to be that rough to get their point across. Now, I'll say this one, it's a bit more subtle. It's really important that your teachers do not demean you in any way when you ask a question, when you show that you actually want to learn. We all have things that we're learning for the first time or we're improving on. And if they clearly show disdain for you, or they mock you for asking a question, cut you down with something really demeaning, if you just express that you need help, and they say something like, no excuses. There's a difference between holding them to a high standard and an impossible standard. I know maybe sometimes it's a gray area, but that isn't gray. Like if you haven't taught your students how to do a brise volet, you haven't broken it down for them and they're struggling, and you just tell them, no, bad, nope, bad, you're actually just causing the student to feel extremely defeated. You're not empowering them with knowledge. You're shaming them into hopefully figuring it out. But how are you expecting your students to figure things out on their own if you're not equipping them? How are you expecting them to succeed if you're not doing your job? Which isn't, by the way, just to give students steps for exercise. It's to break it down. It's to give the why behind what we do. It's to make all these complicated things make sense and to meet the students where they're at and take them to where they want to be. That's what it is. That's the job of a teacher, to help their students get to where they want to be, not give them a bunch of emotional and mental damage on the way and then shame them for not knowing things already, that the teacher didn't do their job to teach. No. So the answer is, those are just, I think, a few, sadly, out of many different things I could have described of toxic behavior. Those were just some of the most common that I've witnessed as a dancer. I want to share with you guys some tips that I have on how to deal with this if you are exposed to this kind of teaching. First, definitely, I would suggest, if you're really struggling emotionally, if you actually are experiencing depression, anxiety, if you're experiencing just very low self-esteem, if it's become very hard to function around this teacher, if your stress levels are out of control and you're having really horrible thoughts about yourself, definitely seek the help of a therapist. I'm a mindset coach. I definitely do help clients who are, maybe they're not functioning totally like they would prefer. Maybe they don't have the confidence they want. Maybe they know that some insecurities, fears, self-doubt, things like that are holding them back from performing their best. I do help dancers to resolve those things so that then they can implement strategies for performing their best, for becoming confident, for, really feeling great, dancing great, and achieving the results they want in their career. I love helping dancers with that, but I do want to say it is my ethical duty to say that if your mental health has gone under severe decline and it is difficult to function as a person, if you're having panic attacks, things like that, please go on psychologytoday.com. It has a wonderful local directory of therapists you can work with over Zoom, but also just in your local area who are licensed within your state. You can pick a psychologist, psychiatrist, licensed professional therapist to work with to help you get to a functional state. And I also do want to say that in some cases, it is very appropriate, as sad as this is, to remove yourself from that school, from that situation. Find somewhere else to dance, even if it's not ideal. Your longevity, your well-being, your mental state, your mental health are very much worth protecting. You are worth protecting, okay? I'm not here to tell you what to do with your life by any means. I'm here to help, but I'm not the expert on your life. So I do want to say, like in some examples, I actually stayed in the school where I was at the effect of abusive behavior for months after I knew that it was a very miserable place for me. I personally have no regrets for doing this. I'm not endorsing it, but I do want to say I personally really, really, really respect dancers who will leave. I have had friends who left when I chose to stay at that school. Again, not endorsing it if it's not right for you. When I went back for the next spring semester, I really chose to be very decisive about what teachers I was going to let speak into my mind and in my life, what advice I was willing to take from them, and what I was no longer willing to take. I understand that for some dancers, what you need to do for you, maybe sort this out for yourself, maybe it's to stay. I got to leave that place feeling like I left on my own terms, and that was personally very important to me. But please don't feel like you have to do that. You don't need to prove yourself to anybody. I want you guys to make the decision that's best for you. And I do want to say that even though obviously you're having panic attacks, anxiety, intense depression, things like that, do work with the therapist. That is outside of my scope of practice, absolutely. However, if you would like to gain support, definitely from someone who understands me. I am a mindset coach for dancers. I do help dancers to get to an optimum mental state that allows them to perform at their best with confidence. I also help dancers who are extremely burnt out to decide if they want to continue to pursue ballet or to move on. And if they continue, how does ballet need to change for them? How does their relationship to it and themselves need to change in order to make it healthy? I help them resolve that. And if I also need to help them come to peace with a decision to leave, I help dancers resolve any sense of regret that might have been keeping them from leaving so that they can be excited for the future that suits them best. So if any of those offerings, those services sound like it would be a great fit for you in this time, I would be so happy to support you as a mindset coach and as a dancer who understands. You can visit kirstenkemp.com to learn more about my coaching services and to book a free mindset coaching consultation to discuss if this work would be just the thing you need to get you to where you want to be in your career. Now, what else can you do to protect yourself from these teachers? First, I want to say, trust your intuition, okay? Trust it. If your gut is saying, this person is unsafe, I see how they treat other dancers, they haven't treated me like that yet, but you know, the red flags are going off, trust it. Be committed to trusting it, okay? That doesn't mean you have to instantly leave or anything. If it's, you don't need to jump to those conclusions, but as the red flags are going off, here's what I would recommend. You pay attention to it. Second, you talk to other classmates and ask them what they've been thinking about that teacher. What do they notice about the behaviors? Third, talk to your parents or other people outside of ballet that do care about you. Talking to them is really important because even though that can be tough because maybe they don't understand, here's an experience I had. I would talk to my parents, for example, about what's been happening. I would really just open up. And then when they would start to suggest to me that that teacher's behaviors were unacceptable, I started to defend that teacher because I was so entrenched in that narrative of I just need to push. I just need to be strong enough to deal with it. No, she's really right. No, I really need to stay in school. But really, my parents were right. They did support me in staying. Again, no regrets about that. But what I do want to mention is it's so important to notice if justifications start coming out of your mouth. Be honest with yourself about how you may be justifying their behavior. That is really important to pay attention to and to recognize that no, that behavior, if it's leading to extreme stress, a feeling of that you're not safe in that environment, you're not able to perform as you normally would, sure, there are things you can do about that, but it is not your fault. You do not need to take all that onto yourself. Also, maybe even with your parents' support, depending on your age, talk to the school administrators, talk to someone else, an outside party, who can maybe talk to that teacher or kind of facilitate a meeting. I know that's so hard, it's so intimidating, but find some way to help feedback to reach that teacher and to make someone within that school aware that it's happening, especially if you're working with a school that is a small business. And for example, if that teacher is also the owner who's treating you very badly and other students, they need to keep their doors open, don't they? And so one thing that you can do is if they don't listen to you, actually consult with parents, get a group of parents together that can come together to talk to this teacher to express that it's inappropriate and to each bring examples of what has happened with their individual dancers. Maybe this isn't the perfect solution, but it is one that takes the pressure off that one individual and allows that person who owns the school perhaps to recognize, wait, this is actually first bad for my business. Maybe they'll actually wake up. Maybe that's idealistic, but it's a way to start. Now, one thing you can always do in the class environment while it's happening is to first gain objectivity about their comments towards you or their behaviors towards you as soon as possible. If they are acting erratically, inappropriately, ask yourself, what's going on with them perhaps that could be causing them to act this way. Maybe you don't have an answer, but maybe simply in your mind, labeling it as something is clearly going on with them. And you can know it from the second they step in the room, you know? And when you see that, put that filter on of they're having a tough day. So they're going to say things that are probably hurtful. So I'm going to really be protective about how I listen to them, what I choose to internalize from them. An example of how I personally built up that mental wall, which totally saved me at times, was, and this is a phrase I still keep around to this day, I would say, I'm not available for them to shame me. I am not available for humiliation. I'm not available for them to make judgments about my character. I know who I am. I'm on my own side. Like, and really, that's another tip. Being on your own side. Rooting yourself in your current understanding of your own value, who you are, your deservingness of an environment of safety. You're only available for their advice on how to improve your technique. You are available for a place to train. You are available for maybe their advice on artistry, just various things within their realm of expertise. Remember, they are not the expert on your life. They're not your parent. They don't know who you are exactly. They'd like to think they do, but they don't. And so you don't have to be available for these character judgments. I'm not saying just when you say, oh, I'm not available, then it's never going to affect you. Not at all. We're all human beings. This will impact us. But just making that thought come up in your head of, here's what level of influence you get in my life. Here's what level of influence I don't give you. Remember that you have the permission to decide that. So dancers, I know this was a longer video. I know, again, there's so much more to be said about this topic. I would love to hear in the comments what you have to add to this conversation. Please keep it nice. Please keep it productive. I hope this was supportive and helpful to you. Know that I care about you and your well-being deeply. Know that you deserve to be well. You deserve to express your love for this art form while also being safe. You don't deserve trauma and damage as a result of loving this art form and wanting to be a dancer. You don't deserve that. And so I hope that this video helped in some way to give you some helpful ways to protect yourself in these environments. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.